Urgent. The Russian army has cut off the main supply route of the Ukrainian Armed Forces Kursk grouping. Zelensky is panicking. Good afternoon, dear friends. We continue to analyze the situation on the front lines in our daily format. Before we begin, I would like to sincerely ask you to subscribe to the channel. Your subscription helps the channel grow. Thank you to everyone who has already subscribed. You know, there was a recent meeting between Russia and the United States of Saudi Arabia, and I won't comment on all the statements, provocations, and hysteria from the Ukrainian side here because it would take up the entire video. Now, let's continue analyzing the situation on the front lines. Let's open the map together. Kursk direction as of February 19th, fighting in the Lochnia River Valley. After Russian armed forces took control of the settlement of Sverdlikovo, the Ukrainian Armed Forces, UAF, made several attempts to regain control of the village. These attacks were expected and successfully repelled. At the same time, building on their success, Russian units began advancing along the Lochnia River Valley, where Sverdlikovo is located, in a northern direction, toward Lebedevka, and a southern direction, toward Novinkoye. These actions help secure the flanks to consolidate the success in the Sverdlikovo area and create conditions for potential further offensive operations in this region. Additionally, after preventing a UAF breakthrough attempt in the Cherkasskaya Konopelka area, Russian units south of Sudzha resumed offensive operations in the Kurilovka-Gwevo area. No updates yet, but they are expected soon. Kupiansk direction as of February 19th. Zauskolye, situation in the Kondrashovka area. The situation in this direction remains largely unchanged. Russian armed forces continue to gradually occupy new positions. The tactics employed by Russian units have already been noted by the enemy. The main tactic involves using drones to destroy enemy strongholds. Russian forces have an advantage in UAV usage in this sector, after which the positions are occupied by infantry. This tactic, thanks to the widespread use of drones with fiber optic communication, is already being actively applied on other sectors of the front. It is currently considered one of the most effective. Among recent achievements is the advance of Russian units to the outskirts of Kondrashovka. Continued movement in the southern direction could lead to reaching the settlements of Tishchenkovka and Radkovka, beyond which lies Kupiansk. By the way, due to these advances, a local administration representative of the city expressed strong dissatisfaction yesterday. However, it is noted that this won't last long. The situation in the area may soon change. Today, as promised yesterday, we will also analyze the Pokrovsk, Toretsk, Chasiv Yar, and Seversk sectors. We will also touch on other parts of the front. So let's start with Pokrovsk. What's happening here? The front is gradually starting to move again, and not in favor of the Ukrainian armed forces. To remind you, they transferred reserves here, including from sectors further south, which has already caused their front lines to collapse there. We discussed this in detail yesterday. In short, they have already lost almost 40 square kilometers in that area, including the settlement of Uladkli. Fighting is ongoing, and a turning point has practically been reached in Constantinople. They are also experiencing setbacks in the Velika Novoselka area, where Novoselka has already been taken under control by Russian forces, who are now advancing toward Volnoy Pole. Additionally, there is movement toward Baladskoye, and the battle for Novo Osheretova is nearing its conclusion. Overall, the situation is grim. Why? Because they withdrew reserves from there and redeployed them to Pokrovsk, thinking they could gather all these reserves to defeat the Pokrovsk grouping of Mordvichev's forces. But nothing came of it. There were some local successes, but many have already been neutralized. For example, if we take the urban-type settlement of Udakhnoye. Here, the Ukrainian armed forces achieved absolutely nothing. They failed to dislodge Russian troops from the urban-type settlement, nor could they even halt the advance. Yes, the progress here is slow and difficult, but it is happening. You can even see on the map that Russian troops have already reached the center of the settlement and are approaching its western outskirts. By the way, if Russian forces manage to reach the western outskirts of Udakhnoye, it's only 3 kilometers to the Dnipropetrovsk region. But that's not the point. The point is that progress is being made, even if it's just 50 to 100 meters a day in some places, but it's still progress. If we move to Kotlin, The Ukrainian armed forces couldn't even enter the village, despite claims from the Ukrainian side that they had completely pushed Russian forces out of the village. That's complete nonsense. According to both American and Ukrainian maps, they didn't even enter the village, although there was information that they entered the industrial zone and that fighting is ongoing there. In any case, if there's video confirmation of this, I'll certainly mention it. The only place where they had some success is the village of Peshana. There, it's a complete mess, a bloody battle. Videos have surfaced online showing dead Ukrainian soldiers from this village. The footage is horrifying and gruesome. I can't show it here because it's against YouTube's rules. In Peshane, the Ukrainian armed forces failed to fully take control of the village. They almost succeeded at the peak of their offensive. They nearly captured the village, but Russian forces managed to hold on to the southern outskirts of the industrial zone at a critical moment. As a result, not only the southern part, but the entire industrial zone of Peshane is back under Russian control, and even part of the village has been retaken. The Ukrainian armed forces are now only in the center and northern outskirts of Peshana. The same goes for Dakhne. The Ukrainian armed forces took control of the entire eastern part of the village and even entered the center. But now they only hold a few houses on the outskirts. That's it. So, the result of several days of offensive operations by the Ukrainian armed forces near Pokrovsk was not the defeat of Mordvichev's group, but rather pitiful attempts that essentially achieved nothing. And even the small gains they made, they've already lost half of them. In fact, they've lost much more than half. Because you have to consider not just this sector, but also where they took these reserves from. As I already mentioned, they took them from the south, and in the south, they've already lost 40 square kilometers and several villages. Now, let's move on to the eastern flank of Pokrovsk. So, the eastern flank of Pokrovsk. Here, things are much more dynamic than on the western flank. Russian troops are making progress every day. Every day brings news of advances. First, the village of Vitoroye Vodyan has been taken. Second, the village of Berezivka has been taken. Third, the village of Zelenoye Pole has been taken. Fourth, Russian forces first reached the outskirts and then entered the southern part of the village of Tarasivka. Here's where it's located. This village stretches for 3 kilometers along a reservoir and plays a crucial role in this sector. Therefore, don't expect a swift end to the fighting here, as was the case with Berezivka, which Russian forces took in just 2 days. The reason is simple. The command of the Ukrainian armed forces understands what could happen if the Russian army breaks through their defenses here. Do you know what? Let me show you on the map. Look, after Tarasivka, there's a 10-kilometer open stretch all the way to the village of Yablunivka. Here's Yablunivka, and here's Tarasivka. Between them, as you can see, there are no villages, no obstacles, no strongholds, trenches, or concrete fortifications, nothing. Just empty space for 10 kilometers from Tarasivka to Yablunivka. But here, it's not even about the Russian army potentially breaking through and advancing 10 kilometers after Tarasivka. What's more important is that in such a case, everything to the south, here, would first be semi-encircled, and if the advance continues, or even if it moves from Toretsk to meet up, we'll talk about that in a moment, then everything here would be completely encircled. And even what's happening now near Kurakov, or rather west of Kurakov, where the Russian army took 40 square kilometers in 3 days, would seem like child's play in comparison. Because here, this entire area isn't 40 square kilometers, it's 200 square kilometers with 12 settlements. And this is now the main objective of the Russian military command. The actions, as you can see, are very, very well executed. As they say, over 3 years, lessons have been learned from past mistakes, and now they are fighting correctly and efficiently. In general, the Ukrainian armed forces are in a dire situation here, so a fierce battle is expected for Tarasivka. The only problematic area on the eastern flank of Pokrovsk is here, in the vicinity of Yelizavetivka. This is the village that Russian troops had previously entered, but were then pushed out of. Now they are attempting to enter again, but so far they have not been able to secure a foothold. Moving on, we come to the Toretsk area. There are reports of significant advances here. For example, the day before yesterday, Pushilin stated that Russian forces had taken control of the Kleban Beek landscape park, which is located 3.5 kilometers from Toretsk. However, as I mentioned, this is just a claim of advancement, and I do not have objective confirmation that it is indeed the case. 2 days have passed, but no verification has been received yet. What I do know for certain is that fierce battles are taking place on Toretsk's western flank, in Shcherbinivka and Petrovka. The main Ukrainian forces defending Toretsk moved to these areas after the fall of the city. As a result, the fighting here is intense, with progress measured not in kilometers, as we've gotten used to, but in meters. In Shcherbinivka, there have been no significant advances, but in Petrovka, Russian forces have taken control of 600 meters of residential areas over the past 2 days. If we move to Chasiv Yar, the situation in the city itself remains unchanged. Battles are ongoing in the Shevchenko district and the central quarters, but there are reports of Russian troops advancing towards the settlement of Stupochki. That would be here. Yesterday, reports emerged that Russian forces had entered the village and begun fighting for it. This is significant because Stupochki is currently holding back the advance toward Kostiantinivka. If Stupochki falls, the Ukrainian armed forces will face a complete collapse here as well. Beyond it, there are just 5 kilometers of roadway and then Kostiantinivka itself. On the Siversk front, Russian forces have expanded their control in Bilohorivka. Even these areas have started making headlines recently. More than half of the war-torn village is now under Russian control. Further along, on the right bank of the Zherebets River, Russian troops have managed to cover the last kilometer before the village of Kolodyazy and have even entered its western outskirts. Kolodyazy is essentially the last remaining obstacle on the way to the city of Lyman. After it, there's just a road with one more village in between, and then that's it. Only open fields leading up to Lyman, as I mentioned. There are no significant changes on other parts of the front. Well, that's all from me. I wish you a good working day, and until next time.